shame, not the cycle, period. Can we say it together? Stop the shame, not the cycle, period. Great, amazing topic. And I am going to be calling on the moderator for this roundtable discussion to come on stage, Rhoda Robinson, Executive Director, Hacey Health Initiative. Is she here? Round of applause, please. And then, can I leave it to you to call your panelists, or should I do that for you? Okay, so Florence Igboayaka, founder Period Comic. Is she here? Florence. Okay. Okay, Dr. Ishak Lawal, Executive Director and Cervical Cancer Nigeria Initiative. Is he here? Okay, please a round of applause for Dr. Ishak. Olivia Onyemaobi, CEO Padup Creations. Olivia, are you here? Round of applause, please, for all our amazing speakers that are coming to the stage. Right, and then we have, last but definitely not the least, Ugochukwu Nwosu, Head of Programs and Grants, ACT Foundation. Ugochukwu, okay, congratulations, we're all together. So, I will hand off to Ms. Rhoda Robinson to, okay, Ms. Rhoda, are you good? So please, take us wherever you want to take us when you're playing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Rhoda Robinson. I am the Executive Director of Hacey, and it is my privilege to be here today and to speak on such a common yet silent topic that everyone knows about but nobody talks about. And we're talking about menstruation and its effects, how people experience it, and what we need to do to make sure that we are able to dispel the myths and the shame surrounding menstruation. So, as you know, half of our population are female, and majority of these females experience menstruation at one point or the other. However, no one really talks about it. I don't think I have ever spoken to, growing up, I never spoke to my friends about it because you are just supposed to experience it and know that it's happening, and then that's it. Whatever happens, whether it's something's going wrong or right, whether you know what to use, whether you don't, that's up to you. The highest you can do is talk to your parents about it, your mom, and then you figure it out from there. With the little knowledge you have from biology class, which does not help much, because you get only one class in female reproductive science. Who remembers that? Exactly. So that's usually the only class you get. And then we have a lot of girls right now who are experiencing various levels of need when it comes to menstrual hygiene, knowledge, and products. So with me on the panel, my able anchor had already introduced everyone. We're going to look into the issue of menstruation, period poverty, and menstrual hygiene management in today's session. So thank you once again for joining us. I want us to start with a simple explanation, basically, of what exactly is period poverty. And I would like Ms. Olivia to help. Yes.
So period poverty is when a girl or a woman lacks the necessary menstrual care materials to take care of their period during their menstrual days. So it can be sanitary pads, can be tampons, it can be anything that is hygienic enough for a girl to take care of her period. So once they do not have access to this, he said there is period poverty.
And how often do girls experience that?
That's really quite very often, especially for girls at the rural and low-income communities. We've had community engagements where we visited some communities and we found that girls were using dry grasses, leaves, feathers, rags, or foams to care for their period. There was a community in Niger State that we visited where the girls were even just packing sand and sitting on top of the sand. So it's really so disheartening that not much has been done, especially for them at the rural and low-income communities. We visited one of the schools of the fiscal challenge, and you found some of those girls not having adequate information on even how to care for their period. One of them was asking with sign language that her friend told her that if she has menstrual cramp, like pain, she should pour powder inside. And this is a practice that she has been doing. So when she pours powder, the blood cakes, can then fall off gradually without just staining her clothes. And this is the information that she has. So a lot of them are having a lot of challenges that, most people don't know when you come to, the regular world like this. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And I know, Ugo, you've done a lot of work when it comes to period poverty as well. Could you shed more light on your experiences and how much awareness we actually have in our society today?
Okay, so I think that the issue of period poverty, for me, the first thing is that when we allow it happen, and when it happens, we actually lose an opportunity to deal with health care at an early stage, right? We are creating some kind of healthcare crisis if we allow it happen, because the outcomes of those girls not having the right thing, some of them have some level of infections that take them to like very later life because of that single help that they could have gotten, right? Now, the other thing also is that the reason why it looks like it's widespread, people don't talk about it a lot, is that maybe our society, which is kind of built on shame, where people don't want to say, I don't want, based on what people are going to say here and there. So you don't hear people speak much about it, and then you don't actually have most of the men know about it. Now, there's something, it could be controversial, but some of the women could also agree or not. More than 70 or 80% of the girls who went into menarche, that's their first period, were either groomed by some auntie, some house help, or some friend somewhere, not their mother, right? And even not possibly their father. So for me, that's like the early challenges and the root of this happening. Aside from even providing external support for others.
Thank you so much. Now, you had mentioned something very important that I would love us to touch on a bit later when you're looking at the shame and discrimination that surrounds menstruation and the menstrual cycle, basically. But before we touch on that, you had also talked about the health effects that could occur if menstruation is not managed. I'm going to keep saying the word menstruation because we need to get used to that word. Can everybody say menstruation? Men, say menstruation.
Menstruation.
It starts with men. So you should be comfortable saying it. Menstruation.
Menstruation.
Absolutely normal. It's a biological process. We need to get comfortable with it. Now, Dr. Ishak, it's nice to see you again. So, Ugo had mentioned about the possibility that we all know of negative health outcomes for young girls during that period and later in life when they have poor menstrual hygiene management. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, let me thank the PIC for inviting me to this occasion. I'm a consultant gynecologist, and it will surprise you to say, if I have this declaration to say that I just realized that I am ignorant about menses as a consultant gynecologist. Yes, I know the physiology and anatomy around menses, but until I had this invitation, I was not in the picture of the social challenges, the tremendous social challenges that are associated with menstrual hygiene and menstruation. I just felt I should make that declaration to call to the fact that it's not just about the medical knowledge. The problems around menses goes beyond just the physiology and anatomy of menstruation. Yes, there are a lot of issues around the menses, particularly psychologically first. When a girl is transiting from child to adolescent, when the menstruation starts, which we call menarche, that is the age of the first menstrual cycle. A lot of changes happens that the parents don't really take note of, or the society. And if not properly taken care of at that time, she's going to seek advice from wrong sector, and that can have not only health issue, but even social implication that has long-term impacts. And Olivia here mentioned something like using of powder, and we know the consequences. It goes into the reproductive tract, causes infection, and can cause infertility in later life. The use of dirty clothes as a sanitary pad can cause ascending infection with its consequences in the future. So the menstrual hygiene, or not having proper knowledge about menstruation, could cause not only the medical health problem, even psychological and some social problems in the future for the girl. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, you had mentioned something about referring to what Olivia said. I think I want to go back to Olivia now and say, now, when we are looking at the lack of knowledge regarding menstruation and menstrual hygiene among our young girls today, how do you think the education sector can help in dispelling those myths and misconceptions? And what role exactly do they play in that spot, apart from biology class?
So you know that the biology class doesn't work. Because most times in classes, when they are talking about this reproduction, the guys will just start shouting and the ladies will start shouting. So we think that it's good to create a separate curriculum or have girls' clubs that addresses this. I think it will give them private sections where they can talk more about the changes in their body. There's a lot. I have a 10-year-old daughter who started menstruating. By the time I came back, she had already changed her sanitary pad. So I run a company that produces reusable sanitary pad. I saw her already washing the sanitary pad that she has changed. It's because she has adequate information on how to take care of her period. But there are so many people, 13, 14, they can't even take care of their period. They don't know the right things, the time frame to change their sanitary pads. And these are critical issues. We've trained 558,000 girls and women on reproductive health and hygiene. So I think that if we have like private clubs that has to do with girls, either maybe using Girl Guide or whatever, they can create a curriculum that addresses this. Why I said it should be separate from, just like you said, it should be separate from the biology class. Last year, May, we held a section like this, having about 27 schoolgirls. And the section was to get from them if we should set up private places where they can change their sanitary pads when they are in school. 87% of the girls said they don't want private sections where they can change their sanitary pad. They want regular toilets where they can change their sanitary pad. And the excuse they were giving is, does it mean that anytime I enter there, every guy in class know that I'm going to change my sanitary pad, you know? So it sparks something different in the head of people who are watching you going in there. So that's why also we should create these private sections, private clubs for girls where they can just be free to talk about things that all of them understand about their bodies. I think that will help a lot.
Okay, I'm going to ask one question. Do you think boys should also know about this thing?
Absolutely. So I have a 6-year-old who said, we need to do this for Michelle because, you know, she's having a period. You know, if they have knowledge of what she's experiencing, they won't be saying, why did you drop your sanitary pad here? Why is your pant here? Shift, you're menstruating, you know. I think they should also, but it's different from having a general class of boys and girls. There should be a separate class where girls should be able to express themselves, you know, talking to girls who are also experiencing the same thing. But of course, we should also put the boys in the light of what menstruation actually is. I have 3 kids. It's actually my husband that calculates my menstrual cycle. It's the one that tells me when I'm on ovulation. So if he doesn't understand that, you still have men who get married and continue breeding children without knowing when they should stop. So having them from this foundation, understanding this and the reproductive, you know, health, will also help them when they grow into adulthood.
Thank you. Please, a round of applause, please. Now, we have one of our panelists, Ms. Florence Igboayaka, the founder of Period Comic, who is currently online. Hello, Florence. Thank you for joining us. Oh, wonderful. Please, could you tell us, can we all hear her?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you now. Okay, so could you please tell us your experience through your work as the founder of Period Comic and how it has helped in creating awareness for girls and educating them about their menstrual cycle?
Thank you very much. So it's actually the Period Place, but the Period Comic is my book on periods. So I think there was a mix-up. So it's actually the Period Place. It's a charity, and the charity is actually a safe space that encourages conversations around periods to dispel stigmatization of periods and provide education in addition to providing free period products for people undergoing period poverty. Now, stigmatization of periods is something that stems from ignorance and lack of awareness. And that's ignorance from the point of even the boys in the class, from what we've experienced, because they don't understand what is happening, they tend to make fun of the girls when such conversations come up. And also there are cultural beliefs that affect and influence people's thoughts and why they stigmatize periods. Lack of proper education and of course hygiene, period hygiene management. These are factors and things that we address under the Period Place.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can. You had mentioned about your work in creating awareness and understanding regarding menstruation and the products. Now, right now, I have realized that the cost of menstrual products are super high. Like, please, can I get a witness here? I know, I'm sorry to say, men in this room cannot understand what we are talking about. You have to have a budget for your menstrual cycle now. And it has to be a very strong budget. Because one, you have to be very considerate about your own body and if you are allergic to some products as well. So you have to think properly. Now, For the privileged, it's easier. You have the option to buy either one product or the other and this and that. But how do we provide for those who do not have the opportunity to afford better products? And how does policy come into this? Because I believe that the government in itself should be able to cater to a very basic biological need of half of its population. I don't know who wants to take that question. It's open question to all.
I can give a go with that. I mean, it's the argument is simple. Menses is a natural process. Therefore, government advocacy should be made for government to provide the menstrual hygiene products free of charge. Because that is very necessary, because the poverty level of the country is very high. And we know that if these services, if these products are not accessible by these girls, they will, of necessity, have to use alternatives. And these alternatives have consequences. And as we all know, the process itself is a natural process. Hence, it's obligatory on the government. If they've not looked at it, we, the advocates, can educate them and let them see why they must invest in that. And luckily, there's beginning to be a shift, even in the health system, where we begin to see menstrual hygiene as a reproductive health issue. So when menstrual hygiene is properly placed as a reproductive health issue, so it's not only the advocates, even the Ministry of Health, the Reproductive Health Department of the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education come together, collaborate, and ensure that the right authorities and right investment is made to ensure that these products are made free of charge today, available free of charge. And it can be done. We've done school health program where we feed students. We provided free drugs to HIV positive patients. So and we are providing free vaccines to prevent infections. So we have the evidence, we have the history that if there is a will, it can be done. So I think it's just a matter of all the stakeholders, myself, yourself, and everyone here, seeing it as a priority and getting it to the government to see it also as a priority, and that, I believe, can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So,
be free to clap.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ishak. Okay. So just to also mention, I mean, at every time that we ask government to fund anything, it sounds very beautiful that we all should say, you know what, government should pay, government should take care of us and all of that. But again, is it sustainable, right? People change regimes and all of that, and things are different for some people. But what we have been preaching more like is, what is a sustainable way of making sure that people who need these things get them when they need them? So it goes back also to our society, our culture, the home, and so on. So I'll give you an instance. We were trying to make some educational materials available for young girls, especially because, I mean, that's where my major passion is, those who are coming into this for the first time. Because if you get it right there, then it goes on. Now, you go to a school and you hear something like, we're more interested in academic books than this. Now, if people who own schools, who run girl centers, are telling you that this is secondary, how do you expect those who make policies to make it a policy? So first of all, I think when we advocate, we need to also understand where the challenges are, who is supposed to move the education, and who is then supposed to like cement the policy.
Okay.
So when you go to some countries, I remember in 2017, Botswana made sanitary pad free for all school girls, especially public schools. And a few weeks ago, I was in Asaba, and I was telling, the leaders of the states that some of these countries are equivalent to your population. If they can do it, I mean, you too can do it. When you go to Kenya, it has become compulsory for public schools to make sanitary pads available. This is very easy. The government can make these policies. If the government puts a policy in place that secondary schools and tertiary institutions should make provision for sanitary pads for the school girls, it will be implemented. Last year, May, while we are still advocating on how to create access for students when they are in school, because once a student is in school and the period starts and stains the clothes, there is nothing that you are saying that that student will listen to you about. So they use their sweater, they use their hijab, to cover their waist. And they lose concentration for the whole day. So we invented the sanitary pad dispensing machines and started prototyping them. Of course, the first thing is, if you put it in school, teachers are going to take them and take to their family members. So we made it that we load the sanitary pad in the dispensing machine, and when you get a vending coin, you go there and get access. So the sanitary pad gives access when you are in school. So maybe you came to school, you didn't have a spare sanitary pad to use, you can use it. So teachers do not have access to, getting those sanitary pads to their family members. So government can make policies like this. It's done in other countries. I want to cite an instance. When this hasn't happened to you, you wouldn't know. Last year, I was in Vancouver in Canada, and they were doing the TED conference. All the toilets had sanitary pads. Now, last month, it's not last month, this month, I was in Amsterdam, and they were having a very serious program, more large population than this. And I changed the handbag and forgot to take another spare sanitary pads to change when my pad is wet. I searched all through the toilets. There was nowhere. And I was wet. It was my first day on my period. I was so wet. There was nothing I could do. I just checked the Uber to go back. When I converted to Naira, it was about 70,000 Naira. I was just asking, where else will I order? So it was easier for me to order than to go back and change. Now, if we can relate with this, that it's not about not having money now to be able to buy, but not having access. Not having access, because at that time, it's not that I didn't have money, but I don't even have, even with my money, I can't get access. So I think that if these countries have made it possible that as large as over 5,000 participants in the TED conference for 1 week, there were sanitary pads in all the toilets, all the female toilets there. We can create the access. When the government makes the policy, they will always find a way to implement it. But the one thing is, let's get the policy in place. Definitely the implementation will become easier. Thank you.
Now, we also have Egemba Chinonso Fidelis online, popularly known as Aproko Doctor. Welcome. Okay, can you hear us? Awesome. Florence, I don't know, are you still online if you want to chime in before we move on to the next topic? Okay, I think we lost Florence. Okay, now, okay, good.
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I want to say something around the policy. I'm glad that the other panelists have talked about the government involvement in providing free sanitary products. But something that we need to bear in mind is sustainability. Because sanitary products are things that are used, in fact, I would say daily across board. So what sustainable policies is good to advocate and request for policies, but again, it's important to look at things that are doable. So one of the policies I think that should be put into consideration is about tax exemption for manufacturers of sanitary products. And this, because we started by talking about the high cost of sanitary products. So if there are tax exemptions for manufacturers, then that would, in another way, bring down the cost of production for people, especially including those that are doing importations of materials, or if they're producing or if they're importing. Those are some policies that can help reduce cost. But again, there should be policies set in place to actually look into production of sanitary products. And that is because sanitary products are used in the sensitive areas of a woman's body. And I lived in Nigeria, of course, was born in Nigeria. I moved to the UK almost 15 years ago. And one of the things that happened in my move was I began to do a laboratory research, to find out what was different with the products that I was using in Nigeria. And those products were so bad that they were harmful to me. Not just that I had itches and I had infections. At the end of the day, extreme cases of using wrong sanitary products can lead to infertility. I, for one, I struggled for over 10 years to have my child. So at the end of the day, policies also is not just that somebody wakes up and starts manufacturing products. What is the end result? So if there are policies that actually look at the content, materials used in the products that have been manufactured, is very important. Yes, period poverty is lack of access to period product, but it's actually access to lack of access to hygienic and safe period products. In addition, it's also the lack of education. So in my view, policies are critical, but those policies should be addressed at, yes, it's good enough to have free period products, but it's also important, if government is not able to meet that, let them start with the little things of making sure that they give tax exemptions, of making sure that they also ensure that the quality of products out there in the market is actually worthwhile and doesn't cause medical issues down the line for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is also a very important point to note, because we keep importing things without investing and supporting local production of things that we know that we need and are extremely important to our populace. And the issue of a tax exemption, period tax, as it may be called, I'm not really sure, but I think in 2020, the government had, removed VAT from tax. However, how has that impacted the production or the availability or the access of for women for sanitary products? And I think that's something that we really need to look into again to ensure that more women have access to commodities. Okay, so welcome, Aproko Doctor. I know what you went through. So you went through a lot just to be here today, so thank you for making it. So we have just talked about what policies, what the government can do to ensure that more people have access, more girls have access to menstrual hygiene education, management, and commodities, and how that plays out. And I think from your own work, especially as an advocate and as a communicator using your platform, I have heard a lot about what you do, and what has been your experience? Now we're moving on to the discrimination that surrounds talks about menstrual hygiene or menstruation itself. Talks about menstruation. Say it again. Menstruation. Talks about menstruation. And how that has, the reception that you have received when you talk about menstruation on your platforms.
Okay, thank you. So I've been a part of this conversation even while I was here, and I can appreciate the intensity to which everybody is advocating for menstruation being a part of, rather not being stigmatized, because as if we get the stigma away from the topic of menstruation, we're actually going to make a lot of headway. But we need to also understand that the stigmatization around menstruation, a lot of it, especially in this part of the world, and especially in Nigeria, has ground in culture and also has ground in religion. There are people who make women feel like they are dirty, especially when they're going through that time of the month. Also, and because of that, we've come up with different names to not say that we're on our period, for instance, the red lady is coming to visit. It's the monthly course and things like that. And in the area of communication, what I've also tried to do is to bring in the men into the conversation. Because as long as we can include the other gender into the conversation, the stigmatization which is rooted in culture and tradition will reduce. Sometimes, personally, I just do it. I go to shopping malls and I get sanitary pads in the full view of everybody, and I'm dropping it. And I get views from certain people and they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, yes, it's a normal experience of humankind. And so why do we make it feel like it's something that shouldn't be talked about? So we would make a lot of headway when we include men into this conversation. We also need to educate men in the conversation, especially from when they're kids and up until, a certain point in adulthood where it's now a part of them, so that they don't see it like it's something that should be avoided or a topic that should be avoided. Communication is very important. Also, the media has a lot of role to play when it has to do with the communication around menstruation. I don't know, how many of you grew up watching menstrual pad adverts with blue liquid? That's not the liquid of menstrual fluid. But why do we avoid, quote and unquote, red when doing those adverts? Oh, we're going to trigger some people. Who are you triggering? Are you triggering the people who are actually menstruating or the people who are not? So these are the questions we need to ask. And as long as we include men into that conversation, we should make a lot of headway.
Thank you very much. Now, he had said something very important about people not really wanting to talk about it and kind of shying away from topics about menstruation. I have a friend who, I think she was having serious menstrual cramp, and she was telling everyone about it. And she said, if I have migraine, I will tell people about it. I have menstrual cramp. Why shouldn't I tell people about it? And that's the fact. It is part of the process. You are experiencing something. But the fact is that there is a covering, a silence, a culture of silence about you talking about your own menstruation that everybody knows you are going through. And when you don't go through it, it's an abnormality that people now say, oh, you need to go to the hospital for. But when you do, it's a problem because it's a shush thing. So how do we address this issue of silence surrounding menstruation, talking about it? Even within women, we don't talk about it as we don't. Let's be honest with ourselves. If you are not like a very close friend or a sister or a blood relative, we do not talk about menstrual health. We do not talk about menstruation. We don't talk about menstrual hygiene. So how do we start addressing these cultural and social barriers that affect menstrual health? Let me start with Ugo, and then we'll go down the road.
That's serious. Okay, so I'd like to say, first of all, just like gender-based violence, in the last couple of days, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the whole 16 days activism and all of that. When you watch some of the movies and what the guys will say is, oh, I didn't know that winking at that lady was abuse. I didn't know that touching her because I want to sit near her was an abuse. So if people do not know about what the other person is going through, it will be hard for them to relate, right? We have had situations where you hear things like, oh, leave here, this is a woman talk, right? I have, the kind of work I've done with period advocacy, I've walked into places and somebody will ask me, what is the need for you? Why is a man talking about something of women? Is it just about making money for you? I'm like, so it's happened a whole lot of time. I mean, I was at an event where I was selling period comics, and like someone came and said, "Are you the one that is?" So I said, "Yes, I'm the one." It's like, "Oh, how come?" Right? So when we try to segregate things, just like what she mentioned about the toilets, we should not keep a separate place where people should change parts. They should do it in the same toilet, right? So that as long as they can make sure they don't stain the place, right? Because as a man, if I stain my shirt, I don't need to go to it separate room. I walk into the same washroom and do that. Until when we make it like a norm, something that people should not stay away from, just to close as well, I don't think it's up to 6 years now or so that I started getting to any woman who is, once I know, in fact, once I hear, I'm like 20 feet away. I don't know why. It wasn't about any indoctrinations because, like our producer said, there's so many cultural things. I mean, that is a big conversation again. There's so many cultural things around women and their period, right? But that's a big conversation for another day. So for me, I don't just know why, but it's the fact that I just don't want to be close. But I mean, like, between 6 to 7 years ago, I met someone who basically started making me like stay and, have that education. And I'm like, okay, and that is when I started taking interest, and eventually till I started speaking to Florence about this, and I mean, it took that much flight in what I do. So we need to be able to like make this like an inclusive conversation, whether among the boy child, the girl child, at home, in schools, in churches, wherever it is. It should not be a hard thing for us to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that the media has a lot of job to do on this. So thank God we have a lot of artists in the house. I think that when people begin to see it on their TV screen, they have no choice. Imagine you switch to another screen, another TV station, and it's still showing you the same thing. National Orientation Agency, I think they can pick it up to be able to, at one point or the other, flash it up for people to see that this is a normal thing that people should have conversation about. Then secondly, I think that grassroots NGOs should be able to create an opportunity where they have community engagement. I remember 2018, I was in Yobe and through the UNFPA, and I was talking to women more about reproductive health. Like I needed them to get interns because most of them were at the camp and they were having babies every year. So we needed them to understand. And then the community leader there walked up to me and said, "Madam, don't go down to that side though. We go stone you here." So they didn't want me to talk more about them, understanding more about their bodies. But I think that NGOs can find a way, to do a lot of community engagement, interface with the women, take them on breakout sections where they can actually express themselves. I think this will help, because if it's what you know that you can talk about, if these women that we're even talking about do not know more about their bodies, how much more about the men? So the women need to have adequate knowledge about their bodies so they can share that with others. So media will have the role to play, and I think also community and community engagement with grassroots NGOs will also help to create more awareness about this and to end the shame.
Yeah, for me, two things: education and advocacy, which also looks like education. I mean, if you look at the theme for this summit, it says building bridges. What is the bridge? I believe that the education is the bridge to build to be able to overcome most of these challenges. So if you educate and we begin to speak about it, we should be able to overcome the stigma around it. But before I end on this discussion, I want to quickly also talk about the access that we talked about earlier. Now, when we're talking about the access, we talk about the policy to the government or advocacy to the government to provide free. but we did not dwell so much on the private sector, even though we talked about the tax reduction or free. But we can also, the private sector, public-private partnership in everything. Government, I agree, as Mr. Ugochukwu mentioned, cannot do it alone. So Olivia mentioned experience about other countries where you have pads in public places. I want to say that we can start the advocacy from here. The next time we come to Sheraton, hopefully next summit will still hold in Sheraton, all the toilets in Sheraton will have sanitary pad. Are we going for that? So by the time the advocacy does not have to be a big thing. We can start with little steps and coalesce so that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. So that the next gender summit, wherever it's going to hold, or policy innovative center will ensure that any hotel or any venue where they are holding program, one of the advocacy or one of the criteria is that that venue should provide sanitary pads in their toilets. And then that's encourage all their partners to begin to do that. So over time, it would then become a practice, and over time, that practice becomes a culture. And before you know it, when we begin to see sanitary pads in our toilets, it then becomes a norm. And then we start reducing this stigma. Thank you.
I'm so glad that a lot of really important points were raised. And I'm just going to focus on communication. Communication. But not communication in the way that we've known communication to be. One very easy way to change the perception or to rather orient a people is through its entertainment industry. And if I'm talking about the entertainment industry, I'm talking about movies in this particular sense, right? There are a lot of things that our people have imbibed just simply because it was in Nollywood. How many of us can agree? Quite a number of us. So we can encourage producers, we can encourage actors, we can encourage the actresses to include conversations about menstruation in their movies. It doesn't have to be the whole focus of the movie, but at least when people are watching this movie, let it be said that somebody who is going through menstruation, because it's a normal part of human life, should be able to say it in a movie. And if we continue this way, after a while, it becomes encouraged in daily conversations, because it is almost as if art is an imitation of life, or, and people just imbibe what they get from movies and simply put it in their daily lifestyle. So communication through the media is very understandable. We can really let people understand that menstruation is a normal way of life without making it look like it's a national agenda. Because once you put it, quote unquote, national agenda, everybody just assumes that you want to sell something to them. I'm talking to people who have interfaced with communities before. Once you put national agenda in front of anything, people just have mistrust. So you can use the movie industry, you can use the skit makers, for instance, to help encourage conversations about these issues. Thank you.
Florence, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for the contributions. That was really good. In line, just writing on some of the things, I have something around celebrities being role models. There was something I watched about, what's it called, mortality rate for new moms. There was something that was put together by some celebrities. I saw it on Instagram, and it was really inspiring, and I began to think in that line. So if some of the celebrities will act as role models and work with probably some of the charities, I don't know how that would work, just to come up with things and promote this, it will also be in the face of people, and they can see their role models actually communicating this. Then the other part is the community engagement, working with community champions and leaders, especially where religion is a barrier. Some of those communities are very difficult to penetrate. So I think having champions within the leadership and having these conversations is easier for the people within the community to relate with their community leaders and champions if those ones have the buy-in into it. And the place of bringing boys and men into the conversation, like for us at the period place, one of the things we run virtual period clinics, and we focused on single dads as well. Because sometimes when you have a woman in the house, it's easier, but we forget that there are men who are also raising their daughters by themselves and would need to be able to understand what is even happening. Because when a girl begins to throw tantrums or she's having her hormone changes and all of that, they don't understand it. So having that space, and I implore NGOs, charities who work in this space to come up with programs as well that wouldn't cost a lot, because at the end of the day, people will say, oh, it's costing money. But when you come up with virtual programs, events that would be inclusive of even the men to help educate them, I think it will help. And something else we've done so far here is that we do role playing with the period comic. So we go into schools and we include the boys, because as we're all aware, if they understand what is happening, they become more empathetic towards the girls, and they understand it at an early age that, look, this is normal and this is how girls feel. So we include the boys in role playing. I don't know how that will pan out in schools, but you don't have to wait to secondary schools, because statistics have shown that girls even start getting periods at age 8 these days. So starting from the primary school, because continuous education is important. Unfortunately, what you learn in biology, you just learn it maybe in one class and that is it. But because it's a continuous learning, people get periods at different times in their lives. They can get it as teenagers. Some might find they get their periods long before then. So all of that is a way to keep speaking about it, not to be ashamed and not hide under some words, like Aproko doctor said. Some people wouldn't want to call it periods or menstruation. They want to say call it what it is, and then people will begin to, embrace it eventually. It would take time, but it would happen. Thank you.
I would like to say thank you to all our guests. I had hoped that we would be able to take comments from the audience, but we've run out of time, unfortunately. We've run out of time. We've heard a lot. We've heard about the challenges that women face. We've heard about some of the key issues that we need to address and how we can contribute to ensuring that nobody, no woman, no girl suffers from period poverty or does not have access to the commodities or the information that she needs to ensure that she has a safe and healthy cycle. And we've looked at the role of policymakers, we looked at the role of policy and how this could improve the access to menstrual hygiene, commodities, and information. We've looked at our role as development experts, as doctors, as communicators, and how this can contribute to ensuring that we address the myths, the misconceptions, the barriers, the cultural and social barriers that surround and perpetuate the silence around period and menstruation. So once again, thank you so much. Let's take the conversations from here. Let's talk openly about menstruation. Let's say the word when it happens. And men to understand and say the word when it happens as well. Let's say it together. Menstruation.
Menstruation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.